There was an almighty row in the Commons today over the problems of the rollout of universal credit, the government's flagship welfare policy. This morning, the Work and Pensions Secretary announced that the helpline will become a free phone number. It had cost as much as 55 pence a minute. But with figures today suggesting that as many as 1 in 5 are waiting more than 6 weeks to get their money, Jeremy Corbyn was sharpening the knife at PM's queues.
Mr. Speaker, last week I asked the Prime Minister to scrap the unfair charges on the Universal Credit Helpline. Today she's finally bowed to that pressure. But the fundamental problems of universal credit remain. The 6-week wait, rising indebtedness, rent arrears and evictions. Will the Prime Minister now pause universal credit and fix the problems before pressing ahead with the rollout?
Prime Minister.
Why have we introduced universal credit? It's a simpler system. It's a system that encourages people to get into the workplace. It is a system that is working because more people are getting into work. And pausing universal credit won't help those people who will be helped by going to universal credit, getting into the workplace and bringing home more pay for their families.
Well, we had hoped that the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, David Gauke, would be able to join us this evening, but he cancelled at short notice. Our political editor, Nick Watt, is here, though. Well, Nick, it looks like they're determined to press ahead with the rollout.
Well, as you saw from the Prime Minister there, and shortly before, David Gauke did say that they're going to press ahead with the rollout, but there are nerves in Whitehall amongst ministers about universal credit. There's a feeling that it is a tainted brand, which they think is disappointing because they think it's very progressive, because they say it incentivises people to come into work, but a tainted brand because of the botched introduction. There was a feeling that there were big rows between Ian Duncan-Smith when he was Work and Pensions Secretary and the Treasury, and perhaps Ian Duncan-Smith wasn't perhaps facing up to problems with the introduction of it. And there's also a great fear, as you saw today, that Jeremy Corbyn can make great hay of this. Lots of sort of videos going out from Momentum. So the government is listening to the Tory rebels. So you had that announcement from the Prime Minister today saying that this hotline will be free, and they are listening to that point that Jeremy Corbyn was making, that is being made by the Tory rebels. Can you reduce the waiting period from 6 weeks to 4 weeks? They're listening very, very carefully on that. But the nerves tonight, the Prime Minister, the Conservatives were mysteriously not there for a Labour vote on pausing universal credit.
In other circumstances, you might think that Theresa May might be quite happy to escape to an EU summit. But anyway, she's got a big day tomorrow at EU summit. And of course, Jeremy Corbyn's going to be there too.
Well, big day for the Prime Minister. She will address the 27 other EU leaders round the dinner table in Brussels tomorrow night, and she's going to go with a goodie. She's going to go with a letter to the 3 million EU citizens living in the UK. She's going to love bomb them and say, we want to make it much easier for you to stay in the UK and you can be consulted. She really wants to send a big signal so that you can move on to the transition, move on to the trade talks. But as you were saying, Theresa May not the only UK politician there. Jeremy Corbyn there meeting 3 Prime Ministers. Not a great surprise because that's the sort of the meeting of the Socialist family, but he's also meeting Michel Barnier, the EU chief negotiator, and Antonio Tajani, the President of the European Parliament. And I can assure you those two are anything but socialists. They're not part of that family grouping he's meeting, and it does show there is a great deal of interest in Brussels at what Jeremy Corbyn thinks, because of course we have a hung parliament.
Nick, thank you very much indeed.